Well, a very good morning to you from wherever you're tuning in from, and welcome to this edition of Inside Politics, your Sunday premier political show. Join us as we keenly evaluate the latest top political developments, and what a week it has been. From the NADCO report being presented to President William Ruto and Raila Odinga, we've seen the clamor around the G7 group, the 7 group of women governors who on International Women's Day had good tidings in terms of release of a report that will look to evaluate the space for women in politics. What does this mean for the political landscape? We'll be discussing that, including the latest clamor around Raila Odinga's bid for the AUC chair. That and much more coming your way, so do feel free to join the conversation at KTN News, at the Jesse Rogers, using the hashtag Inside Politics. Remember, our SMS line is 22155. You can equally give us your feedback and your remarks. I'm Jesse Rogers. Once again, welcome to the broadcast. I'm not alone. My colleague Emmanuel To is joining me from our other studios with the highlights of the week that will form part of the discussions we'll be having right here with my panelists on the round table. Emmanuel To, good morning.
Good morning to you, Jesse.
Proceed, To.
Well, thank you very much, Jesse. Definitely it's going to be a very busy week. It has been a very busy week, and we expect that the next week that is coming is also going to be equally busy with a lot of political activities, nuances, filibustering here and there in Parliament, and so much more. But we just want to start with the highlights of the week, with what we witnessed over the week that has already passed, where President William Ruto on Friday nominated new ambassadors, high commissioners and permanent representatives in Kenya's missions abroad. And among them who are appointed were the former communication director of the Communication Authority, Director General Ezra Chiloba, who has been nominated as Kenya's Consul General in Los Angeles, USA. Remember, if you can recall these happenings last year, towards the end of last year, Chiloba resigned from CAA in October, and after the board suspended him for alleged abuse of office and misuse of funds to the tune of about 600 million shillings. Among other nominees also include at least 6 chief administrative secretaries, CASs, including former Kisumu Senator Fred Outa and the ex-deputy governor Josh Mangi. This is from Kisii County. And remember, there has been a lot of talk about recycling people who had been cited or put under investigations, and we've seen Ezra Chiloba again forming part of that consul and leadership that will be representing Kenya outside the country, and the CSs who still are continuing to wonder which way they're going to go, because majority of them so far have been appointed to different positions. And up to this point, we also had some activities that will be happening in the course of the week or later on, because these members have to be vetted and approved by the House before they take up the positions. Something else that took very keen interest this week was the G7 strategy meeting, where President William Ruto on Thursday hinted at having a woman deputy president in the future. But a rider to this, the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua said this will happen after they leave office. So there has been that discussion, and President Ruto is saying that this is in line with coming up with a 2/3 gender rule, because the women governors, or rather the G7, the 7 governors, said that they want this to be addressed and have the government or the country having 2/3 gender representation in government. So going forward, we would like to know from your panel, Jesse, how soon do we expect these things to take place, and how soon and whether this is possible? Because we had Martha Karua going with Baba Raila Odinga during last year's elections, but didn't work out. Will it work out this time round? That is a question that will be answered. Something else that we'll be looking at is Raila Odinga's AUC hurdle. And another hurdle has been thrown in the way of Raila Odinga, because even as he met the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, in his vote hunting mission, lawyers in the AUC have drafted a proposal to restrict the next race for the African Union Commission chairperson seat to be for a female contender or female contenders. The proposal is contained in the revised draft report titled Preparations for the Election of Senior Leadership of the African Union Commission in February 2025. The proposal must however be submitted to the African Union Executive Council for approval before it is adopted by Assembly. So, in a nutshell, this means that they're proposing their proposals to have the next AU chair or AUC chair to be a woman, because we also want to rotate this seat across regions and, of course, with gender parity concerns. Something else that we expect is that President William Ruto and Azimio leader Raila Odinga on Friday, you can remember this, around evening, we saw them getting reports, receiving reports of the National Dialogue Committee, NADCO. But interestingly, DAP Kenya leader Eugene Wamalwa has denounced the report, saying he will not sign it and he will not append his signature to it, saying it did not address the key issue of high cost of living that was the reason why they went to the streets. And a joint sitting of the National Assembly's Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, JLAC, together with the Senate Standing Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights, was given 45 days by the Speaker of the National Assembly, Moses Wetangula, to consider the report and table it in the next 45 days. And that time is ticking. And we want to see how soon that report will be effective. Something that is also closely linked to that report is the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC crisis. Remember, the boundary review is due this month. Actually, I think 14th of this month is when we are supposed to have reviewed our boundaries according to the Constitution, which seems that the boundary review may not happen as planned, but the NADCO report proposed actually to have that timeline move from 12 years to at least 20 years to allow time for this constitutional issue. And we are going to focus and put more effort into looking at that, whether we're in a constitutional crisis, and we're going to answer those questions. And of course, your panel, Jesse, and to our viewers is going to answer that. So there's so much that will be happening. And lastly is about the international matters that we expect to see a very hotly contested race between the former president of the US, Donald J. Trump, who won during the Tuesday primaries, getting the Republican Party ticket to go head-to-head with the current president, Joe Biden, who is expected to face off together in November elections. Remember, that is also part of the topic. So, Jesse, those are some of the hot topics that we have seen this week, and we are going to give you others that will be coming in this week that we are entering. Jesse, back to you.
Thanks for that breakdown, Tor. Quite important in terms of retrospecting in what has played out in the course of the week. So we'll definitely have him back as he breaks down what we should expect in the coming week a little bit later on. Allow me to introduce my guest joining me in studio. It's great to have the gentleman. Unfortunately, we couldn't secure a lady panelist, it being the week right after International Women's Day. So I'll start with that apology for my Manel right here in studio. I'm joined by Mark Bichachi, a communications expert and definitely has a keen eye on the political affairs in the country. Karibu sana, it's great to have you.
Nice to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Is it still right to say Happy New Year?
Unaribu. They shouldn't know we haven't met yet, but it's great to have you with us.
Nice
Karibu
to see you,
sana.
brother, yeah.
We're equally joined by Fanya Mambo Kinuthia, a lawyer. It's great to have you with us. I'm sure utafanya mambo.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Yes. Karibu sana. Equally joined by Odoyo Owidi. Goes with many titles, but I'll stick with political analyst. Odoyo, karibu sana. Good morning.
Good morning, my brother.
Looking sharp with your cape.
It's good being here. That's my new brand.
So, gentlemen, asanteni sana for your time. I'd like us to begin with one issue that Tor highlighted, all to do with President Ruto and Raila receiving the latest on the NADCO report as it was officially presented to the two leaders, one at Capitol Hill office and the other at State House in Nairobi. And that presentation is coming a day after a joint House committee agreed on the timelines to submit that NADCO report to both houses. That's within the next 45 days for the House to adopt and debate the crucial bills. I think there are 8 amendments and 1 new bill under the NADCO report. Raila, according to what he mentioned, he says he wants the NADCO report implemented without any alterations, while President William Ruto assured of his maximum support to implement the report. Remember, Kenya Kwanza has their way in terms of majority within the House, so the president's approval and support is quite welcome. Let's just listen in to what the leaders had to say as they were receiving that report.
The issues contained in this document are not Azimio or Kenya Kwanza issues. These are Kenyan issues. They are our aspirations as the people of Kenya. Those issues should unite, not divide us.
I am happy that the outstanding issue of two-thirds gender, finally, both sides have agreed on a way forward. I hope in honor of all our girls, our daughters, our wives, our mothers, and all the women of Kenya, we will be able to do this for us as a country.
I had estimated the residents of the Kenyan people to look for peace and tranquility, and I have since been very impressed by what has happened, and I think this is the way to go. Kenya is bigger than all of us, and going forward, after the two houses have done justice to the report, we believe that we'll have peace forever.
And eventually we did agree on almost 90% of the issues that you did task us to address in the National Dialogue Committee. And the few issues that we could not agree on, Your Excellency, as you will read in the report, there are issues that we referred to yourself and to His Excellency the President.
Even if you have to do public participation of the bills, consequent bills upon the report, which has happily been adopted, we want to suggest that we do not take all the time. So fast-tracking it and then getting the final product. We all know, for example, we do not have an IEBC.
Okay, we all know we don't have an IEBC, and as Sto mentioned, the timeline for the boundary allocation is fast approaching. So a lot has been encompassed in this particular NADCO report. As I mentioned, 8 amendment bills, among them Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2023, the IEBC Amendment Bill, Political Parties Amendment Bill, Statutory Instruments Amendment Bill, Leader of Opposition Bill, the National Government Coordination Bill, Elections Bill, Election Offences Amendment Bill, the EACC Amendment Bill 2023. That encompasses what Parliament will be looking at in the next 45 days or so. I'd like to begin with the Wakili in the group for obvious reasons, because listening from the Joint Senate and National Assembly JLAC committees that have been tasked with considering the amendment bills in the National Dialogue Committee report, they say that they will propose later on either a parliamentary route or a referendum route to amend these laws. So looking at the proposed changes, what Kenyans want to know, what's the ideal route? Down the road, will we be going back to a referendum, as was witnessed a couple of years past, or Parliament will have the capacity to institute these changes?
First and foremost, again, a very good Sunday, still morning. And what I'd like to say is that the Constitution is very clear on amendment of that Constitution. And there are specific things that when you touch, especially the structure of the executive, we must go for a referendum. And I do not think that President William Ruto would be willing to go for a referendum in the first term of his presidency. I mean, anybody who has made that mistake knows what it means, especially now when there's a lot of public disaffection everywhere. So having a referendum right now with the amount of public disaffection, and you know Kenyans don't vote on issues, they just need someone to come and say we are refusing, or we are going this particular. You just need to look at where the president will be, regardless of whether that's the right place, and tell Kenyans the president is here and bottom up is not working, so let's go here. So I don't think that that's the best place to go. But having said that, I would like to say this. I usually tell people, look at the American Constitution. How many pages is it? Compare that with our Constitution. How many pages is our Constitution? We have more than 600 acts of parliament. In fact, even lawyers cannot be able to fathom all of them. You can't read all the 600 acts of parliament, and you can't have all of them in your head. We are drowning in law. I think every time there's a bad manners happening somewhere, we come up with a law for it. And then there's another malady, we come up with a law for it. And then there's another one, we come up with a law for it. Kenya is drowning in laws. I mean, I usually say the penal code was enough to punish everything. Like someone steals public money, the penal code says a thief should be put in jail and for this number of years. Okay. But now we have to come up with an anti-corruption authority, we have to come up with ethics and I don't know what, and an anti-corruption court to deal with the same thing that is theft. And then tomorrow morning we decide, okay, now we think that we are not able to live within the limits of the Constitution in terms of having an IEBC in place. Now we want to make an amendment. Well, we know that our politicians have made that mistake. They did not follow the law. I think what we should have done is to punish those people who did not follow the law when it came to the time of constituting IEBC at the right time. So now we are now having to make amendments and use public taxpayers' money and public time that parliamentarians would have been discussing other bills to help Kenyans, to discuss a malady that was created by the same politicians. So I am not extremely happy about having another 8 acts of parliament being amended or changed or even introduced. Okay. Because after we do that, there will be another bad manners by Kenyans. And instead of dealing with it within the legal framework that exists, we continue making new laws. I think Africa is in the process of just legislating, creating new bills, creating new laws for everything that happens. Even when you sneeze in public places, you want to come up with another law to remedy that. And I think that is where we go wrong as a country.
So there's no curative aspect in the NADCO report and the amendment bills that are coming to Parliament from where you sit?
I mean, ask yourself, why do we have all these bad manners? India, I keep saying, has got 3 commissioners in their IEBC equivalent. Mm-hmm. Right now, we are talking of boundaries review. There is one constituency in India, for your information, that has got 3 million people. Because these people have about 590 MPs for a country that has got close to 1 billion voters. Okay. So why are we having these bad manners of even saying now we want to review our boundaries? If India can have one constituency with 3 million people, I think it's a high time we start asking ourselves. So every 12 years, tunazaana, tunaongezeka. By the time we are 70 million, we'll have to bomoa parliament and have a bigger parliament so that we have 1,000 legislators. We need to get to a point where we realize that we cannot continue reviewing our boundaries mannerlessly and every other time trying to increase the number of, because there's no time you review them to reduce. I can tell you if they review them now, we shall have 500 legislators and so on and so forth. And I think it's a high time. Someone was suggesting that Nairobi needs 10 more constituencies. What for? So we just need to realize that at the point where we are in, the 290 are already excess. So let's not add more.
Well, I'm sure the legislators from Mount Kenya will beg to differ in terms of the numbers vis-a-vis the area, whatnot. Odowidi, let me come to you, because the NADCO report came to the forefront due to a couple of issues that Kenyans felt needed to be addressed. Looking at the amendment bills and that one new bill that has sailed through the NADCO sittings and is now going to Bunge, what say you about the plight of Kenyans? Because some might argue, as Kimani Ichung'wah said, we've covered 90%. That 10% will forward to the 2 principals and they'll sit down and look at how to address it. One of them being the cost of living. So did he truly address the plight of Kenyans from where you sit?
You know, the NADCO report was birthed by the street protests. The street protests was necessitated by the claim that the cost of living was very high and the election was stolen, and so the server should be open. Those are the only 2 reasons why people went to the streets. These others were born later. They were argued later. But you will notice that those 2 reasons why we went to the streets are not covered in the NADCO report. They were not even on the table. So it means somebody is tricking us. That each time he wants things round the way he wants, he looks for a sellable thing to the people to take to the streets, to put the pressure on the government, and so that some committee is called, that they later claim that, oh, you see, this is a negotiated report, and so it should now be passed the way it is. When you tell us that we should pass the NADCO report the way it is because it is a negotiated document, and then it was a thing of 2 sides, Azimio and Kenya Kwanza. But there are other smaller coalitions. There's even one that will not be formed yet these things will apply to them. Take, for example, before the last general election, we had Jubilee and NASA. But soon, Kenya Kwanza was born. UDA was born, and it became the largest political party in Kenya. And if there was any law that was made before that, using negotiations between Jubilee and NASA, it would not be part of it. So we must treat all political formations equally. The fact that one look big today, what would happen if Kenya Kwanza and Azimio came together in the next general election, when these so-called negotiated laws were made by them, and now they are one, what does that one leave their opponents? So we must have a country where the rule of law is followed. It doesn't matter what the grievances are. We cannot have people that when they are outnumbered in the National Assembly, they go to the streets, we go to some committee, then whatever comes out of that committee is treated as a negotiated position, and we take it to Parliament and pass it without debate. That should not happen and cannot happen. We must be a country where we have the rule of law.
Okay, so in retrospect, you're of the opinion that it shouldn't be passed as is?
No, it must be open to debate. Even if we campaign, okay, already Raila Odinga is campaigning that we pass it as it is because it's a negotiated document.
Yeah.
I also agree with his campaign. But that campaign should only urge people that when you open it for debate, try not to amend anything. But if it is necessary to do so, because for me, where I sit, the NADCO report has come out of a fraud. The fraud was go to the streets. Why? Because the cost of living is high. Why again? Because there was stolen elections and the server should be opened so that we know who actually won. When we very clearly know that in the last general election, the presidential results were announced from Form 34A and B, which were physically delivered to Bomas. They had nothing to do with the server. So we used fraud to have the NADCO formed, that group formed, to debate, to agree on issues. So this thing is a fraud ab initio. So let us not, we must open it to debate. That is my position.
Okay, well noted. As you come in, Bichachi, to talk to us about your observations around the NADCO report. So much hope was placed on these two groups coming to a sitting arrangement, agreeing on the issues to canvass, and thereafter we had the report. Does it meet the expectation of the masses? And do you agree that it should be interrogated once it goes to the floor of the House?
First, let me just address myself to the issue of how we as a country like to belittle mass action. We like to belittle demonstrations and bedevil it. I would like to remind us that there's a country called France, where for almost a year last year, the workers demonstrated, shut down the entire country to bring the government to a negotiation. It is not illegal, even in our constitution, for people to demonstrate. And I think it is something that we must begin to agree to as a people. Because if we are to say today that demonstrations are bad because they're being done by Azimio, and say that whatever the agitators of the demonstration were doing is illegal, then we are removing a vital part of the Constitution, which is the right to picket and to show displeasure. The very act of democracy is about majority having their way and the minority having their say. Every single Kenyan, not just Boniface Mwangi, is entitled to demonstrations. They're not entitled to violence. That's not what I'm saying. Therefore, the NADCO report and any other agreed position that this country has had over time is not a bad thing. It is not bad for President William Ruto to organize a team to talk to Azimio and say what the voters you represent, the ideas you represent, how can we marry them so that we come up with the same conclusion? Now, why am I saying this? President William Ruto himself, by his own pen, in a letter to Parliament, at the beginning of his presidency, put nearly 3/4 of the issues being addressed by NADCO in that letter. So if there was an initiator of that NADCO report, it is President William Ruto himself. Okay? It is not just about demonstration.
Okay.
When you look at the issues, for example, of gender representation, it is not an Azimio issue. It is every woman, every young person who's affected by that law. And two, we must understand that even in the United States today, the oldest democracy on earth, they are consistently having bipartisan talks to date. It is only in Kenya where we assume that we must forever be enemies, and anytime President Ruto shakes hands with Raila in Museveni's shamba in Uganda, it is a big deal, as though we should never be a country that reconciles and comes up with an agreed position. Okay. We need to stop vilifying our process towards agreement, towards a peaceful country. I think that just that ship needs to sail, and we need to stop politicizing things that are good for our country. That said, it is very clear that there will be a referendum. There is no way around it. Now, my good friend Fanyambo Mambo here said that there will be a no campaign. I don't think so. One, the state will be sponsoring that campaign. It will be a government project adopted by the Parliament of Kenya, and the executive will take ownership of it. Raila Odinga, the largest opposition figure, is not going to stand against it. Who will have the...
They said they wouldn't be in
Jesse,
support.
I like Eugene Wamalwa. I like the fact that he's pushing the voice of the people, because on the matters of cost of living, I am 100% behind him. I would like to be able to afford the steak I used to eat, because now we eat in kibandas now. We can't go to big restaurants anymore. But the point is, Eugene Wamalwa cannot mount a no campaign only in Western. He can't. If you just give him Western, he cannot manage it. He has not grown to the political acumen required to pull a orange versus banana movement as it was in 2005. Because remember, in 2005, it took Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, and very many larger-than-life political actors to make the banana fail. And remember, President Kibaki himself did not campaign hard. So the referendum is happening, and there will be no opposition. Take that to the bank. Because, number one, that NADCO report may have very little for the common mananchi, but it has a lot for the politician. In ODM today, they are already arguing about the leader of opposition, because that seat, with its assistants, with its drivers, with its policemen, is very attractive. As Raila Odinga campaigns for AU, someone in ODM is thinking, that could be me. Right? Yeah. So that's one.
Okay.
For the politicians, NADCO is excellent for them. Increasing and re-territorializing our boundaries, good for them. More opportunities for women means more people into their party, good for them. There is nothing that any right-thinking politician will say no to. And even the ones who are saying no, saying it's about cost of living, are saying that for political expediency. They agreed on everything. They even agreed about questioning whether President Ruto was rightfully elected. They agreed, let's review the 2022 elections. But they could not agree on reducing the cost of my fuel? Come on.
Okay, interesting. And it definitely shows perhaps the political angle and the Wanjiko angle in this whole report. As you come in, Wakili, I just want to hear briefly from Nelson Makanda, who's in the IEBC selection panel, on perhaps what they're waiting for, especially with NADCO still discussing the IEBC selection process and whatnot. They've been on ice for quite some time. This is what he had to say, just briefly.
NADCO or no NADCO, I'm waiting for resources. Yes, we respect political processes. We respect parliamentary processes. It is how we legislate and make law in this country. But as it is now, we have a law. And that law, yes, and we have orders from the court. The others, it's something for us to wait for. And how it will turn out, how it will end up, it's sovereignty of parliament and the Kenyan citizenry who will participate in the lawmaking processes.
So you are not in any way under any pressure, political pressure or otherwise, to do your work?
We are not under any pressure. We have received no pressure whatsoever. Yes. The pressure that I have is resources.
Just resources.
Yes, resources.
If you are to get the resources today, you will start today.
If I were to get the resources today, we'll finish the process in another 40 days from today. Yes. Because we have names. We have very good applicants, very good Kenyans who applied. So it will just publish a short list and give notice to come for interviews. We'll run interview for 10 or so days, and we'll forward the names to the president.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all.
Now, remember earlier on, Kalonzo Musyoka said we don't have an IEBC. Here, the chair of the IEBC selection panel says we're just waiting for resources. People have shortlisted, we can't gazette it because there are a couple of impediments. Just briefly, Wakili, your review on the IEBC issue as you bounce off what the other guests have said.
I think the stakes are usually too high in our elections. And that's why sometimes IEBC becomes like this so important thing to every other person. But why it is important is because we have not allowed our elections to be system run, they are people run, such that what the IEBC commissioners announce or what the returning officer is announcing is the most important election outcome. I told you, if you look at what Brazil is doing, that every time they create their election system, they throw it out to hackers and they tell them, go and try and hack this, and then we shall give you a reward for any person who is able to hack. We are in 2022, 24 now. We are looking at going into an election in 2027 that is purely dependent on some people sitting in a primitive classroom in 2027 and counting pieces of paper.
Even with all the checks and balances,
And I have asked
and
I have asked myself, anybody who has a bank account or an M-Pesa in their phone, you don't sleep with 1,000 shillings and wake up in the morning, it's 910 shillings, not unless you had borrowed from Fuliza. Your money remains 1,000, Bob. And if we can trust a system as simple as M-Pesa with our billions of shillings that is transacting through those phones at night, if we decide it is possible for every person in 2027 to vote from the comfort of their bedroom, we don't need those queues. We don't need. In fact, the system would tally them and count them, but because we don't want a transparent election, and because we do not want an election that gives us the best candidate and the correct candidate, and because we want to control who will be president in 2027, we bring this nonsense of printing papers from abroad. Ask yourself, Tanzania here, that is not, and we keep comparing ourselves with them and saying they are behind us. I don't know where he's behind, because those people print their own ballot papers and they run their own elections. We run the most expensive election in the whole world. I mean, the cost of voting per Kenyan is too high. The cost of even maintaining IEBC or commissioners in these countries is too high. So sometimes I even refuse to discuss the constitution. I start discussing what kind of brains were Kenyans given. Because I think that's the conversation we should be having. What kind of brains were Kenyans given that are so unique in the whole world? And we are the ones who are comfortable with having the most expensive election per person in the world. And the rest of the people have a problem and they're looking at us and wondering, we can't even print our own exam papers.
I think it points to the trust deficit we have in the election process. And at times I think legislating laws will actually cover the trust deficit we have. Odoyo, briefly, as we take a short break.
If there's any moment I agree with him, it is this nonsense of so many papers, take this and do that. Because, we were already going very digital in the other election. But after the complaint of who stole what, who's hacked the server and so on, there was the Maina Kiai thing that came back. Now we are going to count physical from 34 A's and B's that actually reaches bombers. When we had already gone very digital. But because some people did not agree and convinced the public that votes were stolen through some hacking system, which cannot be proved anywhere. And you see, this paper thing is much more easier for those mandarins in the village to steal votes. I know places where people go, tell you, go and vote for so-and-so, take a photo and return it here to me for your money. And that steals more votes than if we had an electronic system, a computer system, where you go and vote there, sometimes you vote online, and it is actually audited by experts. We would have a very good election, quick, fast, and there is no time for monkey business.
Just one statement. Systems cannot outdo stupid. Donald Trump shook the American electoral system, tested it to its core, convinced Americans to nearly commit a coup against themselves. America has had systems. The problem with this country is we cannot outdo our own stupidity, our own selfishness, and our own political bad manners. It does not matter whether we print papers from heaven and Jesus himself is the returning officer. We will still say things went wrong. That's the problem with this country.
So despite the numerous security features and whatever bottlenecks we've put,
it's not about that. It is that Kenyans have bad manners.
Okay.
We have bad manners on the road. We have bad manners on the street. Unaambia usikojoe hapa. We have bad manners everywhere. That's the problem.
Garbage in, garbage out.
There are
as they
people who
say.
have
Anyway.
mastered the art of convincing the public that this is red, and the public will believe. This is blue, and they'll believe. This is stolen, and they'll believe. This is mine, and they will believe. They have mastered that art.
All right, let's take a short break, gentlemen. The show is getting heated. As we take that short break, as we come back, we'll be listening in to what Ambassador Dr. Wallace Williams had to say. He's a member of the Pan-African Institute and a former ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda to Nigeria. He'll be talking about the AUC clamor. Of course, Raila Odinga mentioned his interest in terms of the AUC chair position, but a couple of issues have emerged. Most recently, as Emmanuel Toh mentioned, a couple of people are proposing that this time round we should have female candidates eyeing that particular position. If that proposal goes through, what does it mean for Raila Odinga? We'll be finding out next, right after the short break.